Parents in Saskatchewan know this. Finding childcare can be difficult. Perhaps you even started thinking about it before your child was even born. For some parents, the affordability of childcare has even impacted their family planning. Could they afford to have another child without access to $10 per day childcare? That means many people across Saskatchewan were breathing a sigh of relief when it was announced last month that the province has extended its $10 per day childcare agreement with Ottawa for another 5 years. But the province's auditor warns that Saskatchewan may not meet its targets to expand childcare availability. Auditor Tara Clement's second volume of her annual report was released last week. It found that Ministry of Education may not meet its target of having 46,000 licensed childcare spaces by March of 2026. And as of March of this year, just over 41,000 of those spaces was up and running. So, with so many still in development and some may not even materialize, we're looking at the state of childcare in Saskatchewan. We'll be speaking with a daycare director in Rocanville. She's also chair of Childcare Now in Saskatchewan and advocacy lead for the Southeast Saskatchewan Directors Association. We'll hear from the director of the Saskatchewan office of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives about childcare deserts, and we want to hear from you. What was it like for your family to find childcare? How has the $10 a day child care subsidy helped your family? Or if you're a childcare provider, what was your reaction to the federal agreement being extended? You can call right now, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Kara Werner says her childcare center's waitlist is still about 3 years long, with very slim chances for school-age children and preschool kids to get a spot. She's the director at Dream Big Childcare in Rocanville. She's also advocacy lead for the Southeast Saskatchewan's Directors Association and chair of Childcare Now in Saskatchewan. Kara, welcome to Blue Sky.
Hi, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. And Simon Enoch says affordable childcare without access is a false promise for Saskatchewan. He's director of the Saskatchewan office of the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Simon, welcome back to Blue Sky.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicole.
So I want to get your reaction, both of you, to hearing that the $10 a day agreement was renewed. Kara, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think when it first happened, obviously there's a little bit of relief that it's going to happen, that we're going to get that extension for the next 5 years. Gives us a little bit of breathing room to fix the things that need to be fixed. But I felt like I was a little hesitant on celebrating too soon, because we really do need to know what the details of that deal is, and how that's going to affect the sector.
Simon, what about you?
Yeah, I share the same concern. We haven't really seen the actual MOU. We don't know what's been promised in regards to, space creation and things like that. So, the devil will really be in the details. So I'm sort of cautiously optimistic until I see the actual details.
Simon, what does having $10 a day childcare actually mean for parents?
Well, it means affordability. For many parents, childcare is their largest expense, particularly when they have, below school age children. And moving to a $10 a day system dramatically reduces that family expense. So, and for many families, makes childcare a possibility, because prior to the $10 a day program, it was just simply out of reach, even with the sort of multiple subsidies that governments would try and give to families. So it's really been a massive game changer for Canadian families.
Do you have a sense of how Saskatchewan compares with other provinces when it comes to being able to offer affordable $10 a day daycare?
Well, certainly we were the first to get to the $10 hurdle, like to create $10 a day daycare across the province. So, the government deserves credit for that. That was kind of the easy part. Now the hard part is underway, which is creating the accessibility, because having $10 a day daycare when you're stuck on a waiting list for how many years, it doesn't deliver the goods. So really creating those spaces now, I think, is the priority. And I hope the government is on track to meet its target, but there are reasons to be concerned that they might not be.
I really want to hear from parents today, or even, maybe it's grandparents who stepped in because parents were having challenges. But I'd like to hear from people. So if you do have your own experience that you're willing to share, just with even the process of trying to find childcare, you can call 1-800-716-2221. Now, I spoke with Shayla Dietrich earlier, and about what her experience was like trying to find childcare. She lives in Regina, and she has 2 children. Take a listen.
So it's been a bit of a challenge. I've been lucky, though, compared to lots of people I've talked about. We were on many wait lists for my first child for quite a while, but because my husband went back to school, we managed to get onto a list at the university. And so we got lucky in that sense. We managed to get a subsidized spot there. And then they only take kids who are 18 months and older. So I took an extended mat leave for my second child to make that work for us. So I've been very, honestly, compared to many people, lucky. I know people who've been on wait lists for years and haven't heard anything from subsidized homes or daycares, I guess.
Were you trying to get into unsubsidized as well, or were you just holding out hope for a $10 a day spot?
So for my son, our hope was always subsidized, knowing that we might not have a choice, but knowing that we might have to just bite the bullet, because it never made sense for me to not return to work in terms of I like my job, and financially it made sense to go back no matter what. So we actually put my son in an unsubsidized home from when he was about 12 months to about 18 months before we got into the subsidized one. So we did go that route. It was still an interesting dance of who has capacity and referrals and all of those things. But we did use unsubsidized as well.
And what's the difference in cost between, having one of your children in subsidized and one of your children in kind of the regular daycare?
We were paying around $800 a month for my son when he was 12 months to 18 months. I think it was $825, and then maybe it went down a bit once he hit 16 months. It was something like that. So around $800. And then once he got into subsidized, that went to $214.
That's a dramatic difference.
Oh yeah, that's a big change in the monthly cash flow for a fam.
For sure. What are you hearing from some of your friends who are also looking for childcare at the same time?
Mostly just stress and frustration, I think. So not sure if they should hold out for subsidized, if they should go the non-subsidized route, if they're not going to get into subsidized, stress about the financial side, of course, and I think that's different for everyone's situation. But I think more it's just about uncertainty, really. I think it's already kind of stressful to try and go back to work, obviously, for a mom. And so adding this on top of it, I think it's just another thing that they're worrying about. Financial side of it, and just the logistics of it. When am I going to find a spot, and what's that going to look like for our family?
Do you know any parents who decided to stay home instead just because they weren't able, maybe not decided, but who had to stay home because they couldn't find a spot?
Yeah, I don't have anyone specific that happened to. I have examples of a lot. I have a lot of friends who did 18 months. They extended their leave because getting a spot is even harder under 18 months. So I know that. I had friends who did that. And I know friends who've gone the route of enlisting the grandma or the grandpa daycare. And so I've seen that lots with friends, but no one that I know has had to actually fully stay out of the workforce. I know that's happening, but I haven't had a specific pal that's happened to yet.
And I mean, you were talking before when we were doing political stories about daycare being your number one election issue. How are you feeling about it right now?
I mean, on a personal level, I feel good because I'm in a good spot, but that doesn't mean that I'm cognizant of the fact that's not the case across the province right now. And so I'm encouraged that our province signed an extension. I think that's a bit of a relief for parents and for centers and for people in the industry. I really hope it's taken as a first step. Okay, that was step one, and now we need to address some of the other issues that the industry's seen, specifically stuff that folks who work in centers or who run centers are flagging as major concerns. I know there was a center that had to close in the city due to some of the funding issues that they've been flagging. So for my family, I feel I'm in a positive place, but I know that's not the case. I know there's for others that are on lists for months and months and months and years and are stressed. So I think that great that we sign an agreement, but people who want to access daycare at an affordable rate should be able to do so. And that's not the reality for a lot of people right now. I'm glad that we signed, but I want it to be something that's made a priority because whether people realize it or not, like affordable childcare impacts every aspect of our economy. And it means that people can stay in the workforce, go back to the workforce. And like, I shared those numbers of what the difference is in what we paid. And like, that's a big chunk of change that's back in the monthly cash flow for our family. And that's not money that's just sitting there going into savings. Like, if we're being honest, that's money that we're spending in our economy or we're spending on our kids. So we could spend more on daycare, or we could spend more on the well-being of our families and feeding our families. And I think we're lucky we are able to do that right now, but I want more families to be able to take advantage of that program too.
Shayla, thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
That was Shayla Dietrich, a parent of 2 in Regina. Right now, I'm talking to Kara and Simon. Kara, you work in the daycare segment. What were you thinking when you were listening to that?
I think she is echoing things that we hear parents say every day. It's the same concerns. It's the same thing that we've been advocating for, certainly for the last few years as well. If we can't get parents out into the workforce, it's bad for the economy, and it's bad for the children, and it's bad for the families. So we really need to look at the areas that we need to strengthen right now. I mean, it's great that we have the deal signed, but again, I agree. It's a stepping off point. It's a starting point. This is by no means the finish line. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in the sector right now. We need equitable funding models. We need wage grids that are set in stone and put in place so that our educators can feel like they have some sort of stability. And that in turn is going to make a higher quality childcare for families.
There's so much to talk about, and I'm hoping that we can get to it all today. But I just want to talk about that cost, because it's actually quite stunning when she talks about, $200 versus $800 a month. Like, that's $600. Like, when we're talking about property tax increases that people are freaking out about, that's over a year. That could be made up in this one month of childcare. So I'm just wondering, I'm sure you talk to people who are private daycare providers as well. I just met somebody on the weekend who runs a private daycare in Lumsden, and she says she charges $40 a day, and it's still kind of like breaking even because food costs, all that. What kind of incentive is there for people to open daycares right now? Are you hearing from people who are able to make a go of it?
Personally, no. I don't have a lot of contact with like the for-profit centers, as it were. But I know we were looking at expanding, and that's something that was definitely put on hold when we didn't know where the funding was going to be coming from. We didn't know if we were going to have funding come 2026. So it's definitely something that affects your day-to-day operations. And there's been so many centers that I've spoken to in the last little while that have made significantly less this past fiscal year than they did the year before. And it's solely based on grants, and our educators, their wages are changing, right? But our operating grants are staying the same. So I would imagine if you were starting out, there isn't a lot of incentive to do that right now. If you're wanting to be, financially viable, it's a real concern. We need to crunch the numbers and figure out what needs to change with the grants and the way they're being divvied out, so that it makes sense to the daycares to expand or open new centers for parents.
Simon, do you have any thoughts on the for-profit part of it?
Well, I mean, the for-profit part, I think it's concerning insofar as they have the capital to make those kind of expansions and to invest and to create spaces, but also research shows that they provide poor quality care and have worse sort of child development outcomes. So the spirit of the agreement is to ensure that it's nonprofit or publicly owned childcare spaces are being created. So it's extremely important, as Cara said, to ensure that nonprofit centers have that sort of fiscal stability, have those wage grids to be able to pay high qualified staff, and ensure that the money is there year over year, so they can make sort of investments in expansion if they need to, and to ensure that they continue to provide high quality care to children.
Last week, the auditor released a report saying that the province may not meet its target for childcare spaces. Let's listen to a little bit of what she says.
So right now, for example, unmet demand. So they are choosing not to, obtain some wait list information. That would probably give them good information around where do we have wait lists across the province, and therefore where they should be funneling the funding to almost support childcare spaces. So it's almost like where's that additional pressure and need for childcare. The other thing would be utilization. So what we actually found was when we assessed ourselves that there's obviously been childcare spaces created as such. When we looked at, okay, what is the extent of spaces that are out there? They aren't all being utilized fully to the same extent, could be sometimes just the turnover in terms of a timing. You haven't, someone's departed and we haven't filled it, but 694 instances where the childcare spaces weren't being fully utilized. So again, something that would be useful to analyze, to go, have we, in essence, almost like put too many spaces in one location or one community. So if you have a coverage rate or the number of spaces that have been created in Regina are getting where you don't have a lot of wait lists and you have a lot of spaces that aren't being utilized, that isn't probably where you would continue to funnel money in the future. And given that this agreement has now been extended for the next 5 years until 2031, definitely something I think they have to think about and utilize, because it would be then they're making the best choices when they are increasing those spaces and giving the dollars. The other thing would just be the early childhood educators. So right now, obviously, the ministry undertook a number of initiatives to, support and increase the number of early childhood educators, tuition-free training, and so forth. It's a matter of, did they do enough? They aren't analyzing, well, what is the extent of spaces almost? What are the childcare providers? How many really, qualified staff will they require? And are they churning out enough? Because it takes a while to train these people, sometimes a year, sometimes 2 years. So if they're going to get more money in the next 5 years and they want to create more spaces, you got to make sure that you have the qualified staff to also be there to fill them and make sure they're useful and they're being utilized correctly. Without adequate funding, there is a risk that the providers, won't have the necessary resources to operate, might have to close. So in the event, the ministry has now renegotiated with the federal government, but they should look at sort of what is that sustainable model that they envision over the next 5 years and probably into the future. So in the event there isn't federal funding beyond 2031, from the child care sector, perspective, they need to figure out how do we maintain and sustain this model going forward. They also want to look at other provinces have gone through, so Ontario is an example, and they've figured out, well, what is that base funding amount? How do we make decisions in terms of which childcare provider should get how much? They might want to use things like, it depends on where I'm located in the province and so forth. So they do have to figure out what is almost like that funding model now and into the future.
That was Auditor Tara Clement. Simon, you're with the Centre for Policy Alternatives. What were you thinking when you were listening to that?
Just that there still are a lot of outstanding problems, and the auditor's report is a fulsome sort of overview of where the government's at, and I think I would encourage people to read it. My biggest concern are these so-called spaces in development that the government keeps sort of claiming as part of meeting the target, and we don't know what those in development means. I mean, Are they licenses for new spaces? Are they increases in capacity to existing centers? Or are they really just hopes and dreams? We just don't know what in development means. So my concern is, that's almost 7,600 spaces that the government's claimed it's created towards its target that I'm not sure are real. So I really think the government might be guilty of counting its chickens before they've hatched here. So I'd like to get some clarity from the government on what in development means and how much we can rely on those numbers. Because the auditor herself says that, there's a real risk that these so-called in development spaces may never materialize.
Oh, the number that stood out to me was 694 spaces where they can't fill them, which seems bizarre in this province. And so, initially I start thinking, well, how hard is it maybe to find staff in that area? I'm not sure. But you've looked at the province and childcare deserts, Simon. So give me a sense of where some of the places are right now where people are having the most trouble trying to find spots.
Yeah, it's rural Saskatchewan, right? Almost 70% of rural Saskatchewan has less than 3 licensed childcare spaces for every 10 children. And this is something the government's going to run into, right? Because when you sort of take a laissez-faire sort of free market approach, which is what the government sort of has done, you'll fill up places where there's demand. And as you say, like a labor pool like Regina, Saskatoon, that's the places where we're seeing, better sort of results and more density of spaces. But places in like rural Saskatchewan, the government may have to start planning just like they plan for schools, right? Look at provincially owned daycares or municipally owned daycares. The free market may not get it done in those places. So those sort of, low accessibility, high need places, the government needs a plan for how to ensure that spaces are created in those areas.
Today, we are talking about childcare in Saskatchewan. We have 2 guests, Kara Werner. She's the director of Dream Big Childcare in Rocanville. She's also advocacy lead for the Southeast Saskatchewan Directors Association and chair of Childcare Now in Saskatchewan. We're also joined by Simon Enoch, who's the director of the Saskatchewan Office for Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. And we would love to hear from you. We just heard about some of the challenges in rural Saskatchewan with finding childcare. If you do live in rural Saskatchewan, please give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or you can email bluesky@cbc.ca. Kara, I'm curious. You heard I should probably give you an opportunity first to weigh in on what you heard from the auditor.
Yeah. So, I think what she had alluded to, there really is a lack of data being collected by the government. And that's a real problem. If we don't have the numbers and we don't know where the funds are needed and where it's lacking, that's going to be a real problem. Like Simon was saying about the childcare deserts, 51%, so over half of our kids in Saskatchewan live in childcare deserts. So I think they really need to start looking at that. And I think that's where that equitable funding model comes into play. We need to come up with a formula of how this money is going to be equitably delivered to centers to make sure that everybody's getting equal opportunities for childcare in Saskatchewan.
That sounds complicated. Is it? Why is it so hard? Why is that so hard?
Yeah, any of it's going to be complicated, right? But the first step to that would be consultation with the experts that know the numbers. People like Simon, there's advocates all over, there's directors all over, there's ECEs. They need to get out and they need to be talking to the people that are in the sector to understand what it is that's needed and collect the data that they need.
What difference would that make to you if you had that data? What would you do with it differently?
I think it would be huge. If we had the data, we would understand what it is that we need in different areas and where we're lacking right now, whether it's grant distribution or whether it's compensation or whether it's just spaces for children. We would have an accurate number of knowing, okay, here's where we're lacking, here's where we need the most spaces, here's where maybe we have enough spaces for right now to meet our goals, and maybe we can divert funding to these other areas that don't have the care that they need at the moment.
Now, you're in touch with a lot of people who are trying to open up daycare spaces. Just to help us give some examples, I guess, some practicalities of what is the cost to try to do this? And are there costs that you have when you do a public daycare that you wouldn't if you had a private one?
I mean, there's huge overhead regardless, right? There's lots of hoops that you have to jump through. There's lots of steps that you have to take. You have to start with your survey of needs to find out if there's even a need for spaces. And then obviously there's a huge fundraising process. So that's definitely going to be a lot more difficult for the not-for-profit centers. You're doing that. You're going to have a board likely of volunteers that are volunteering to raise sometimes upwards of millions of dollars to open these childcare spaces, depending on how big the center is. So certainly looking at what they were talking about, having for-profit centers included in the deal, we're looking at $1.6 billion on the deal. If 10% of that is diverted funds to for-profit centers, that's $160 million that's going to centers that can then profit and put profits in their pockets. It doesn't necessarily have to go back into the business. So I do feel like when you're looking at for-profit centers, you're looking at bigger corporations, and it's certainly easier to carry that overhead to get these centers started, whereas the not-for-profit centers are doing it the old-fashioned way, and they're doing fundraising, and it's grant money, and it's blood, sweat, and tears.
I just want to have a sense, even in Rocanville, like what is the demand like for childcare in your community? Do you have a wait list right now?
Yeah, we have a huge wait list right now. And we have a wait list for preschool and toddlers as well. So it's not just infants that need spaces. People desperately need spaces here. And we kind of put our plans on hold to expand because we didn't know what was going on with the deal. If it was going to be signed again, 2020, March 2026 could have looked a lot different than what we're looking at now. So that had kind of been put on hold. But we have a bustling community. We're in between multiple mines. So we have a bustling little community here and lots of people that want to move to Rocanville to work at the mine. And that's one of the things that they say they struggle with the most is housing and childcare. So if they don't have those two things, they can't move to an area like Rocanville where it's very rural. If they don't have a center, and we're the only center in Rocanville. So
like what are the stories that you're hearing right now? Do you hear from people who are deciding not to take a job because they can't figure out the childcare before they come?
We have parents that email us and say like, hey, we're trying to get childcare set up before we move to the area. So lots of that gets put on hold if they can't get spaces. And it's an awful thing to have to tell parents that, yes, I can put you on the wait list, but it's likely going to be 2-3 years before we see any movement on that list. And by the time you need an infant space, your child won't be an infant anymore. So there's definitely frustration there. And there's even frustration from parents that are in it already that maybe don't always get the schedules that they need or the hours that they need or the days that they need because we're just so full and we're trying to accommodate kind of everybody. We're trying to accommodate as many kids as we can.
How is it to find qualified workers in Rocanville? I mean, you do have the mines, you do have other jobs that are paying a lot of money that might draw people. What's the struggle?
Yeah. It's a constant struggle. And I don't think it's just a struggle in Rocanville. I think it's a struggle across the board. But yeah, we certainly struggle in rural areas, I think more, simply because, there's a lot more people living in the city. There's a lot more people that want to live in the city if they choose to relocate. So I think there's maybe more opportunities there to hire ECs, but it's a struggle all the time. And then I think that you're hiring specifically because they have a certification, not necessarily that they're a great fit, or there's lots of other angles to look at, but we're mostly just desperate for ECs all the time. I don't think there's ever a time where we couldn't use an extra EC at the center. It's difficult all the time. And then, like you said, we are competing
childhood educator, just for people who don't speak daycare lingo.
Yes. Yeah. So, we're always looking for educators. And like you said, we do have the mine in the area, which is a really well-paid job. And they've been fantastic in working with us. But that's also, we're in competition with that as well.
How are they working with you?
So they support local charities, they support local not-for-profits. So they've been great with having grant programs that we can apply for to get extra grant money. So yeah, they've been wonderful in that way. But it's definitely a struggle to find educators that want to come to a small town and stay in a small town. And that's part of it is the benefits and the compensation. That's part of why we're advocating for that as well, because we need to make the sector look more appealing to educators that are coming into it.
I want to bring in another voice here, just from another part of the province too. So Sheila Parody, she's the executive director of the Natural Wonders Early Learning Centers in Swift Current, and she spoke with our producer Joelle. Maybe we can take a listen.
When I started over 20 years ago, about 1 in 30 children required additional supports. Now we're seeing about 1 in 3 to 5 children needing additional supports. This can vary, of course, from speech to motor skills, but the largest incline is social and emotional regulation. If we don't turn out more educators that are better trained, it does not matter how many spaces you open. People won't stay in environments that they're being bitten, kicked, and punched. And we need tools in our toolboxes to manage that. So wait lists or no wait lists, we need those educators in those spaces to provide those very important and fundamental tools for our educators. I feel the province has worked very hard to have that turnaround time, but it takes a long time. It takes 2 years to get a diploma if you're attending the program full time, and if you're just attending it in evenings, which 50% of our province is rural areas. So most of our ECEs are taking classes either in the evenings or weekends or online in order to build their EC skills. And I think all levels of government need to work on that to streamline the process for international ECs. Our centers we probably have about 70% of international staffing. And right now that is becoming more and more difficult to recruit and retain due to some of the regulations that are put in by both the feds and the provinces. So I think that that's a really big priority right now in order for the governments to meet all of their mandates, is to include international staffing. They come with very good credentials, very good training, and a lot of experience. And I think that plays a big part into rural Saskatchewan's EC components right now. It's not just the retention of staff, but it's also the ability to get those children into our programs. And so the staff that are coming out of the education where they actually are trained in the field of inclusion, they know what they're up against the majority of time. They know what they're up against because their practicum placements would put them in environments where they're exposed to children of all abilities. And we're not just talking about children with diagnosed disabilities. We're also talking about children with social emotional regulation, lack of speech, lack of core, fine motor skills, gross motor skills. There's so many different components to inclusion that doesn't just mean a diagnosed disability. Being hit and kicked and spit on every day doesn't bring anybody into the field or keep you there, especially when our wages are deplorable. Even with the wage top-up, our wages still don't meet a typical diploma program of $35 to $51 per hour. With our wage enhancements, we're at $8.85, we've got a threshold of $28.93 right now. Well, to graduate out of a diploma program and make $28.93 and get hit and kicked, that doesn't keep people in their work placements. So we really, really need a very well thought out and comprehensive package to keep our early childhood educators, pensions, non-contact time, those kinds of things, to keep our early childhood educators in the field. The number one reason, that any person stays in their career is to feel valued and that they are contributing. We have seen surveys that report ECEs are living in poverty. To go to work all day, as difficult job as this is, and to go home and have to decide whether you're going to pay for your food or your rent. That's very hard to hear from your employees. We're wasting our recruitment dollars if a fair compensation package is not in place, as that doubles retention. Right now, without the wage enhancement, diploma ECs are making $18 to $22 an hour. The disparity is bleak and must be addressed. When compared with other diplomas that make $35 to $51 an hour, in my opinion, with a lot less responsibility, even with the $8.85 ECE3 wage enhancement now being paid a threshold of $28.93. We're still well below what is considered to be a fair wage. The early years are the formable years. More brain development happens in children in the first 2,000 days of their lives than any other time in their human life. We need quality to make sure our children are going to do well. We have lots of staff here with masters. We've even had people with doctorates in early childhood education. When you have to tell them that they're going to make $20 an hour, that's very hard as an employer.
So that was Sheila Parody from the Natural Wonders Early Learning Centers in Swift Current, one of the areas in the province that I believe has a little bit better coverage when it comes to daycares. But there's a lot to unpack there. I want to bring in another email from a listener, Janet, who writes, I graduated as an ECE in Toronto in 1991. My first job paid $18.90 an hour. I left the field after 10 years because of the cost of daycare for my own children. I live in Saskatchewan now, and I've looked at expanding my education and working in childcare again, specifically with neurodivergent children needing extra support. When looking at job opportunities, the hourly wage is criminal. Pay educated childcare workers what they're worth and stop lowering the requirements as well. So there was a lot in that from Sheila. Let's talk about that inclusion part, because Janet was talking about that in her. If you have a big wait list, I imagine you would pick the easy kid. Why would you pick the kid that is going to be more challenging and take more time from the staff if you have 30, 40, 50 kids to choose from? Kara, what's going on in practical terms in this province right now? Are people who do have kids with higher needs, are they able to access childcare at all?
I think it's more difficult. I do think it's more difficult for them to access childcare right now. If we're not able to staff the daycare as is, if we need to bring in extra support workers to support children with higher needs or special needs, we can't find them. So even if we have funding for it, which you can jump through all the hoops and do all the paperwork and do all the assessments, which is significant for parents to have to do as is, then you're looking at not being able to fill that spot, even if you have the funding. It's difficult to find staff and then be like, hey, I have this job for you. It's working. You know, we were allotted 6 hours a week for you to work with this child. So that in itself is difficult to find. So yeah, I would say that it's definitely more difficult for them to find care.
Simon, can you weigh in on the training aspect of it? Give us a sense of how much training people are expected to have this job. Do we know, maybe between the two of you, like how much does that cost to get the training? And then when you're picking, you're a young person or an old person or whomever, but you're a person looking for work, and you're considering the time and investment and taking the course versus what you're going to get out of it after. Help us understand, how ECEs or early childhood educators compare with other fields, maybe with similar education.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't speak to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Simon.
I was just going to say I can't speak to how much it costs. I know that it's between a 1 and 2 year diploma for an ECE, but as your speaker there just said, like. One of the most important times of child development in those early years. So you want to have qualified people. But once again, as I said, if it's not an attractive wage package, if the working conditions aren't good, if the supports aren't there, it seems so reminiscent of the public school system, right? But at least we compensate our teachers and value them. We need to do the exact same thing with ECEs because, like I said, if we don't have those people, we don't have a system, right? This isn't babysitting. This is early child development, and we need to value those workers and the skill sets that they bring to help develop our children in formative years.
Kara, you can help us understand, what kind of training is involved to be a ECE.
Yeah, so if we're looking at the diploma, you're making a 2-year commitment. So whether you're going to school face-to-face, which is the 2 years, or if you're doing it, like Sheila was saying, in the evenings, which is what we have most of our staff doing, you're doing courses as you can. It can take upwards of 3 years to get it done when you're doing it in your spare time and then working full-time on top of that. And so when we look at payoff, like Sheila had spoke to it, we need to pay workers what their worth is. And I don't think that we're there yet. So to tell somebody who's spent 2, maybe 3 years of their life and upwards of $10,000 to $20,000 on their education that they're going to be making under $30 an hour is criminal. And we're looking at, like we are a publicly funded sector, but we don't have publicly funded compensation or benefit equivalents in any way. So that is something that needs to be put in play. We have educators that are burnt out. The sector as a whole is burnt out. And I'm not saying that this is the quick fix that's going to make it all better, but it definitely helps when you don't have to go home and worry about getting a second job so that you can pay your mortgage, or worry about getting a second job so that you can pay for your child to go to daycare, or so that you can pay for groceries. It definitely helps lessen the burden.
Are there benefits? Pension?
Any benefits that are set up at daycares are through the daycare themselves. So it would be paid for, nothing through the government.
And it might be different. Might it look different across the province?
It is different across the. It would be different. Every daycare would be different. So it would be something they would have to look into themselves, and decide what company they want to go through and get their benefits that way. So it's going to be different for every daycare. There's nothing.
So there's an $8.85 wage enhancement. Who pays that?
So the $8.85 is paid by the government on grants. So we get a wage enhancement grant every month, and that is then paid out to staff. So it's up to $8.85. Not all staff are getting that $8.85. It's less for level 1s and level 2s. That's what we would get for a level 3. So that $8.85 comes from the government, and then their base wage is paid through the daycares.
And so what is, like, if you could give an estimate, if you're trying to talk to somebody who's considering going into the field, what are people generally making per hour?
So again, it's going to depend on their schooling, but you're looking at just under $30 for a level 3, and you'd be looking at just over $20 for a level 1.
The other thing that Sheila had talked about that kind of stood out to me was I believe she said 70% of her staff are international. What are you seeing when it comes to who is filling these jobs across the province in daycares? Are you seeing a lot of daycares relying heavily on folks who come from other countries?
We're definitely seeing an influx of it now, where we're seeing international workers. We don't see it maybe as much in the rural areas as they would in the urban areas, but certainly we do still see it, yeah.
Simon, is that something you've looked at all, is at the reliance on international workers to fill these roles in the province?
No, that was news to me too. So, but certainly something I'm very curious about, particularly given the sort of cap on international students, whether that might affect the recruitment pool as well.
What do you think, Kara, what do you think people don't understand about this? I mean, I don't want to end the show on a bad note. I don't want people to not want to go into this field. And I feel there's been a lot of doom and gloom. They're like, you're not going to get paid well. You could get spit at, tell me, help us understand a little bit about what drew you to this field in the first place and why you're still in it.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think anybody goes into education, whether it's early childhood education or just regular education. I don't think anybody goes into it for the paycheck. You certainly have a love for it, and a love for working with kids and wanting to help them grow to be the best humans that they can possibly be. And I do feel like that is the best part of my day every day. So there's certainly some perks to it. But that's why we're fighting so hard for the educators and the kids that are at our centers, because they deserve to have the best education. They deserve to be paid fair wages. And so we just want to make sure that we're a voice for those people. It's not all doom and gloom. It's usually pretty fun to come to daycare.
Okay, I'm going to read an email from Ryan in Regina who writes, "We simply could not afford to have 3 kids in daycare without subsidies. Even 2 at the same time would be extremely difficult. Probably about 80% of the staff of both daycares are international." So that, again, in Regina, that kind of checks out with some of what Sheila was talking about in Swift Current there. We've had a very positive experience with many of the staff that have worked at both our daycares. They deserve good pay. They do good work. And that came to us from Ryan in Regina. I mean, I guess it's a bit of a priority thing. I'm always interested in how Canada compares with other, I don't know, my Facebook feed or my Instagram stuff is always filled with things that Finland's doing great. Like, what's Finland doing when it comes to early childhood education? Do you have a sense of, countries that have really invested heavily in early childhood education and what that looks like or what we could maybe aspire to?
Is that for me or Simon?
Well, whomever, but Kara, let's start with you because you're smiling.
I mean, definitely when we went to school, they pull a lot of information from places like New Zealand. We see amazing programs run in New Zealand as far as the quality of the childcare that they're giving. Even things like Reggio Emilia, Italy, that's something that is sort of like a foundation of what we do in early childhood education everywhere across Canada right now. So yeah, we certainly see some areas where they're doing things better that I think we could learn from that. I think we could really pull some information from that and try to do better here.
Simon, I don't know if it's not your general forte, but have you looked at this at all?
Well, certainly, in Europe, their coverage rates are like, according to the agreement that we did with the feds, we need a 59% coverage rate. In Europe, it's 67%. So the standards are higher. I believe the pay and the working conditions are better. They're committed to a publicly run system, and their outcomes are phenomenal. But hey, we're trying to create an equivalent system. There's going to be growing pains. So I would sort of hope that the government is committed to creating this system, maintaining it, creating the stability and certainty we need to see the sort of investments and for people to sort of decide that this is the place where I want to spend my career. So yeah, I'm optimistic.
Kara, I mean, you're probably somebody who would be consulted if there was a push even within high schools to have more people know about ECEs. I mean, we see this kind of pipeline from industry. There's a demand in industry for this, and then therefore there's a push for high school and having even online courses accessible. Are you seeing that kind of movement in the province right now when it comes to recognizing that there's a need and trying to fill that locally?
I mean, we're definitely out there doing the career fairs and, shouting from the rooftops, telling them that it's a great career choice. But I think we need the information to back that up too. We need those fair compensations, the benefit packages. We need those things to be able to make this look like an attractive profession, not just a job.
Who are you beside at those career fairs?
What's that?
Who are you beside at those career fairs?
Oh, we've got the mine, we've got small businesses, we've got pharmacies, we've got, all of the businesses that we're competing with. So it's a tough sell when you're like, hey, you can do your 2-year diploma and then you can get paid almost $30 an hour with no retirement.
I want to leave on a little bit of hope. Kara, what brings you the most hope for your industry right now in the future of early childhood education and daycare in this province right now?
So we recently went to a childcare summit in Ottawa. And I met some absolutely amazing human beings that are championing for childcare. And that gives me hope right now to realize how many people out there are being voices for what we need in the sector. That gives me hope for the future. It gives me hope for fighting for what the children need and fighting for what the educators need, is knowing we have good support there.
And Simon, what are you keeping the closest eye on right now when it comes to childcare spaces in the province?
I mean, meeting the targets, right? Like I said, this is one of the largest universal social programs we've created in a long time in Canada. I think all of us in good faith want to see it work. So hope government is committed to it, and that. We can meet these targets and create the kind of system with the accessibility we need for our province.
I truly appreciate both of you making the time to be part of this conversation today. We were talking to Kara Werner. She's the director at Dream Big Childcare in Rocanville. She's also advocacy lead for the Southeast Saskatchewan Directors Association and chair of Childcare Now in Saskatchewan. Simon Enoch is the director of the Saskatchewan Office for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. I'm Nicole Huck. You've been listening to Blue Sky, and tomorrow we're making some space. The holiday season can be a really difficult time. The malls are blaring Christmas carols, there's party invitations, pressure to be in the Christmas spirit. But for those who are grieving, whether it be the death of a loved one, a broken relationship, illness, loneliness, whatever it is, this time of year can be painful. So On the next Blue Sky, we're making space for it all. It's our annual Blue Christmas show. And if you want to feel a little less alone in your grief, join the conversation between 12 and 1.